Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
And today we're going to discuss the consequences of not having a Session Zero for your game.
Jump down the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with us.
You actually came up with the idea for this video based on a situation that happened in one of our games.
Exactly. We have talked about, Session Zeros over and over again in our videos and how important we think they are. Now, we had an unfortunate situation where we had a game that was set up, GM was going to run it, situations change, new GM steps in. Well, I already had my character made, I already had a backstory written, I was, signed, sealed, ready to go. I didn't make any changes. GM presents, well, this is the story we're going with, without discussing it with everybody. No problems. Everybody seems to be digging what's going on. But when we sit down to the first session, and he says, well, here's where we are in the Star Wars timeline versus where I thought we were going to be over here, things are not lining up correctly. Mentality's just a bit wrong. So I think there was like a major problem with the way my character was role-playing or acting. Nothing mechanically needed to be changed, but I felt that the character was not fitting well into the game. And if I would have continued on, I think I would have been a distraction or a problem in the group with where we were set up to be. I don't hold true to everything that I've made. Like, nope, I made this character this way. This is what I'm going to do. Screw everybody else.
Right. So what you encountered was, here's my character and concept over here. Here's the storyline. They both were created in bubbles that did not come anywhere near each other because there was no Session Zero. There was no real discussion of the game. Even before, like, there was a vague outline of a different game, but even that wasn't that much. So luckily we did have another GM that was willing to step in, but he's like, okay, I'll do it. And in his mind, he had a story, and your character's story and the story he's running didn't really mesh that well. So you had to, on the fly, start making adjustments as a player and, divorce or unmarry yourself from certain concepts and ideas in order to make everything mesh and mingle. And this is one of the consequences of not having a Session Zero. We play with a lot of different people, and some of us agree with some things, and some people don't. And we definitely have certain people we play with that go, a Session Zero is a waste of time. We could just be playing. Now, oftentimes we've seen what happens where, like, everyone comes up with their characters, they show up for game day, everyone formed their character in a bubble. We're playing for a certain time. Some of the characters are meshing well. Some of them adjust. Some characters adjust to mesh with something that's going on. Our first Star Wars game was a great example of this. Two of us were two and a half of us were kind of like mercenaries, and then you kind of seem to be digging the idea of the mercenary company that we were kind of trying to lay down on the rest of the party. And so you got on board. But then we had two players that were like hardcore, hardline Jedis, and like, this is how we do it, black and white. So it really just made for a bad party dynamic. And like, two of the players definitely wanted to kill each other, throughout the game. And yes, players. I said players, not characters. No, it was the characters that were not jiving. They didn't agree. The one character's like torn between Jedi and mercenaries. The other character is like, I'm all about my ship. I don't really care about the rest of it all that much.
Well, we had Bart in that game, and he was, I'm just a cutthroat killer on the mercs. You had David and Mike, who were like the hardline Jedi. They were the super good guys, and I was kind of in the middle of Jedi and merc. I had started off as a Jedi. I survived, all the issues going on with the Jedi being killed, and to kind of hide my abilities, I went off and joined this mercenary, group, and, went with that idea. And I've been working with you guys for a while, but it was a challenge to be in the middle, especially when it was like, there were times where you guys were ready to draw on each other, and I'm like, oh god, we can't be having this, guys.
Right, and I was playing a character that was a Chevin, and Chevins are all about making deals and the bottom line,
Uh-huh.
right? So like that kind of lined up with the Mercs. Like I was like the middle, like I was kind of like an arbitrator
Uh-huh.
between doing things, and we were working for the rebellion, and like I was like, all right, it's cool, they're paying, whatever, we can make this work,
Right.
you know. So that game did start to deteriorate. Now after that game, Scott was like, maybe you guys are onto something with a session zero. The very next game he ran, we did a session zero. We played Shadowrun campaign with the Cypher System rule sets. Now that game was so much better. The players all got along so much better, and we actually, we created the characters together. We interlocked our backstories. There was so much more unity in that team than any of the previous games that we played, and even like this game we're playing now is kind of similar to that as well.
Mm-hmm. So, we literally played, less than a week ago, and when we showed up for session 2, I'm like, I'm not feeling what I've got going on with my character. I've got a guy who's very interested in raw strength and beating down his adversaries, eating different types of prey just for the taste. And I'm like, well, this is not going to mesh. How on earth could he be considered a Jedi Knight having these qualities? Yeah, I might have found a holocron to be able to, start my training, but we're talking about the Jedi's at the height of their power. I would have eventually been found and brought to the temple. So I could not have been this way for all of this time. So I need to make some twists. I need to make some turns. So Mike actually showed up early, before everybody else, which gave me, the time to sit and talk with him and say, what can I do? How can I mesh this in so that I'm not a distraction and, feel that I'm a part of this world as opposed to like constantly bucking against what's going on. And, we talked for a little bit. It didn't take all that long, but I got to make a change. I had a much better second session than I did first, and I felt like I was a part of the game as opposed to like not feeling right. There was just that unease because mentally I was bucking against the story.
So one of the obvious problems that happens because of not having a session zero in these particular instances are player expectations and GM expectations were completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Like in both cases, two different GMs both had expectations of how the game was going to run and play, and then all the players came with their own. But because it was never discussed, we weren't able to line up those expectations and move forward with them. This time, it's going a little bit smoother than it did last time, and it does seem to be working out. But like when you look at the game, because it was a lot of the same players in the middle, that was Shadowrun and Cypher System, where there was that session zero, really a lot less of this stuff was coming up because we had an idea what was going on in the campaign. We had an idea what the GM thought was the GM's expectation for the game. And then we were able to put our own expectations out there and kind of meld and gel these things together.
I strongly suggest if you guys have been on the fence about session zeros or if you're rock solid against it, I'd love to hear your arguments for, why it's not really a good thing. My experience, especially with like non D&D games, I find that it's absolutely essential that you need to be on the same page as everybody else, because if you're not, you can be completely out in left field while everybody's close to home plate.
What it does for you is when you have a session zero is it sets the tone, the theme, and expectation of the game. And more importantly, it sets it in a way that hopefully everyone has those things all the same, as opposed to everyone coming with their own, and it can be vastly different, and it creates friction and it creates tension points between characters in the game, the players at the table, and you're just you're more likely to have not have a smooth game. more likely to have these ripples that are going to create maybe not the best gaming experience for everyone. Now, I get like you're busy. Who's got time for a session zero? You could be spending that time gaming instead of doing that. But
But
what it might do is save your game down the road so you don't have to restart it or end it and start a new game because the last one fell apart.
you give an hour or two to make the hours, that you'll be playing later that much more enjoyable, that much more memorable.
So there's some like specific examples from our games. Can you think of any other consequences that could come up because of not having a session zero?
Well, without a session zero, if I say, well, all right, I'm going to run a D&D game. Well, I'm not giving you any information. I might tell you, level and what's allowed, but you might create a character that is just completely unable to be done in the game. Oh, well, you want to play a half-orc barbarian who doesn't speak much. And, oh, by the way, I meant to say that we're doing a urban noble politics game.
Right.
Your character is not going to have any fun. How on earth are you involved? Now, you might twist that at creation and say, oh, well, I'm actually the abandoned bastard child of, Lord Farquaad, and, he loosely knows this, and he's got a trinket that ties himself to the family. But if you don't come up with that story, you're out of place.
Or I'm so and so in the game's bodyguard or something like that. But that being said, even though like you can find ways to fit that character back in, but that's not a fun character for that game to play. So that's definitely something to consider. The other thing is sometimes you'll marry social contracting into the session zero. Like we've had people show up to our games and do things that are really immature. And that we wouldn't want, like a shape changer that wants to be very sexual in his shape changing and doing really weird stuff at the table.
Right.
Where session zero, you'd be like, no, there's certain things that are off limits, and that's not the kind of things we want in our game. Like sometimes we'll set actually like a rating, like like a movie, a PG, PG-13, R. How dark do we want it?
We game with your son who's 16 years old, so anything that is above that, at that or above that R rating, he's not going to feel comfortable with. Some of our viewers out there are kids. There shouldn't be a whole lot of cursing involved in our games, and that makes it a lot easier to be able to watch, and we don't have to worry about parents contacting us saying, hey, blah blah blah, or no, you're not allowed to watch that because there's too much of this or that. It makes it easier.
Well, yeah, but even from a this is being viewed standpoint, just from a, hey, everybody wants to enjoy the game at the table and be comfortable. Like these are things that you can address in your session zero, so they don't have to come up in the game. So no one has to have that uncomfortable, talk with the one player being like, yo, you need to tone it down.
Which we've had over the years with like players who get into a concept that the DM is not comfortable with. And it's like, look, I'm sorry, but that's just not kosher at this table. Can you accept the hint already?
Yeah, so there's things like that are going to come up, but they don't have to come up if you do a proper session zero, and then you don't have to deal with these consequences. But the question is, guys, what are some of the things that have come up at your table because you didn't have a session zero? We got a place for it down in the comments below. While you're there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
You can support us over on Patreon.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.